All right.
Hi, Ninita. I'm still in the interpretation channel.
I can hear you.
And can you give LA Spanish recording rights?
Give me 1 second. You still haven't requested for me yet.
Well, Anita and Francisco are working on that. I just want to welcome everyone. We're just working on getting our interpretation services setting up here. Welcome to the DOTI Advisory Board meeting. It's great to have everyone here. Just a reminder to folks, please update your names. If you're a DOTI staff member, please note that you're DOTI staff. If you are a advisory board member, please note what district or how you might be representing the city through this. And also, we did have a request from one of our board members to throw on cameras, so no pressure. I know some of you all might be commuting on the train and things like that right now, but if you're able to, that was a request that we did have from another advisory board member. Nanita, Francisco, how are we doing? Are we still working on getting things set up?
Oh, we're good.
We're good to go?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Francisco, thank you so much.
I'm sorry,
you need
Ninita.
a minute?
I still don't have recording rights.
I approve it. You send it to me and I approve it.
I don't have a way of recording.
Okay, let me try again. Can you send it to me again, please?
Okay, we're good.
Okay, let me share.
Great. Francisco, thank you so much for joining us for the interpretation services. So this meeting can be accessible to those speaking Spanish or listening in Spanish. Would you like to go through an announcement for us real quick to let folks know how to use the services?
Absolutely, Ellen. Thank you. DOTI, as part of its efforts to reach out to as broad a segment of the community as possible, it offers interpretation services. If you haven't gotten a chance to use this service in the past, please click on the globe, the interpretation globe, and select the language of your choice. Como parte de los esfuerzos de DOTI para alcanzar al segmento más amplio de la comunidad posible, DOTI ofrece interpretación en estas reuniones. Si no ha tenido la oportunidad de utilizar este servicio, por favor, pulse el globito de interpretación y seleccione el idioma de su preferencia. Thank you, Alan.
Great. Thank you so much, Francisco. I just want to thank DOTI leadership again for supporting these interpretation services. We love it that the department is so supportive of this. Welcome, roll call, and meeting minutes. So we've welcomed everyone. Gary, would you like to go through the roll call one more time?
Sure enough. I see that I've got 9 already just from the identification. I'll go through the ones that I don't see yet. So Alicia Brown. Ann. Jamie Lewis. Julie. Riskin.
Julie's on leave of absence right now.
Say again?
Julie is on leave of absence.
Okay. Paul Sear and Tinsley. I don't see Tinsley yet. Okay, with those, we have 11. And I want to ask, is there any new appointed members that I'm not aware of?
Not at this point in time, Gary, to my knowledge, unless.
All right, that means we have 16 active members. We're missing 3, mostly mayor appointees. And we're at 69%, which I believe is quorum. Is that right, Jake?
That's right. Yep. Yep. So
Okey-doke.
thank you so much. Yeah, thanks, Gary. Great. We're going to flip the agenda around just a little bit tonight. We're going to do DOTI Leadership Report, a Council District 5 project update, and we're going to have the elections. I think they'll go fairly briefly since we have one candidate in each role. We won't have to have any long-winded speeches tonight since we have two great candidates for leadership. So Nick, would you like, actually, no, my apologies. We have public comment first. So Nanita, do we have anyone signed up for public comment this evening?
Yes, we have one. Let me. I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. Let me know if you're in for your comment.
Hi, I'm ready.
Oh,
Go ahead. You got 3 minutes.
Okay, awesome. Hey there. My name is Hong and I live in the Highland. Today, I would like to give a public comment about my experience biking in Northwest Denver and some of my challenges. I love biking to run my errands and carry out business in my area of town. I appreciate not needing to get into a car to drive a few blocks to my grocery store. I don't ride on the sidewalks and I stick to the city's recommended bikeways, including protected and regular bike lanes. In recent months, I've encountered issues with the West 46th Avenue painted bike lane, where it is routinely blocked by either construction signs or private vehicles. I reported these issues to 311 and included clear resolution pictures of license plates if applicable. However, I get lukewarm responses from city services stating that the vehicle or obstruction is no longer there when they have arrived with no follow-up. I can't help but think about DOTI's new speed camera enforcement strategy that is Denver's future. If we are paving a path forward where owners of speeding vehicles will be ticketed after the fact, I hope we can also consider this for vehicles illegally parked in bike lanes. Since my time is limited, I wanted to conclude my comment with a gentle request for city services to install requested right-of-way bike parking in a timely manner. I was thrilled to park my bike at my local refill store in their brand new Denver bike rack. And then I learned from the store staff that they were supposed to have gotten the bike parking installed a year earlier. I hope that we can expedite bike parking installations to further promote commercial business harmony, along with inviting more bike riders to ride their bikes. Thanks so much.
Thank
you
you.
so much for joining us this evening. It's good to see you. Appreciate your public comment. Next, we have our report from DOTI Leadership. Nick, would you like to give us an update this evening?
Yes, sir. And I'll be relatively brief here today. It's been somewhat quiet over the holiday season, but a few items of note that I wanted to share with you all. First off, we are officially collecting sidewalk fee revenue from residents on there. And that is, I know a number of folks on this call participated and advocated for this and really helped it get through the amendment process successfully on there. And so very excited about that. We've also hired a sidewalk director, I think DOTI's first ever sidewalk director on that. So very excited about progress really launching on that program. And really getting down to it. No more updates on Tabor and all of those things. So very excited about that. On the micromobility side, the switch from Lyft to Bird has been completed on there. And you may have seen this in the news, but Lyft has basically pulled out of the dockless mobility space nationwide on there and was able to assign their contract. So all of the requirements that Lyft had now Bird will have. And you may remember back in, if you're a scooter OG from the 2018 period, Bird was one of the pro operators in our pilot on there. But excited to see that. And of course, we are approaching the end of the first 5-year license period for these, after which time there will be a competitive reprocurement on there. And so you will hear certainly more about that and look for engagement on that. But excited to have Bird, and they're now orange scooters, might be a University of Texas thing, I don't know, the bird scooters out there for the remainder of that initial contract term on there. Solid waste, we also have completed our shift on solid waste service. I'm not going to talk much about that because we have Nina Waysdorf is going to come and speak with us at this meeting, but so that change has begun, and we are already seeing service improvements on there, but I don't want to spoil anything else that she's going to share with you today. And then the last thing, and this is a little bit different than some of the material I've shared before, but certainly very critical. You know, when we think about equity at DOTI, we have 3 pillars: how we build our department, how we invest in the city, and then the third is how we make sure that as we're investing in the city, we're helping build up small women, minority-owned businesses in the city. And part of doing that is making sure that the process for doing business with the city is as clear as it can be. It is still doing business with the city on there. And so DOTI has released a new website called Do Business with DOTI that really, I think, does a fantastic job of simplifying the process, making what is very complicated as clear and concise as it can be. So if you or anyone is interested in doing business with DOTI in whatever form that may be, please encourage them to go to that, and certainly please encourage them to reach out to us. End of report, Mr. Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Really exciting news. Thanks for the update, Nick. Any questions from the board for Nick? No? Great. Oh, Joe, actually, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I came in late. Well, I just want to know, Nick, is there going to be a schedule or something like that for the sidewalks? Is that part of their first thing to figure out how everything happens so we can form our constituents? Yeah.
Yep. So that will be basically our new sidewalk director's kind of first task, and work has already begun on this, kind of the preparation for the sidewalk master plan. And that really, just like it sounds like, that will be our roadmap for immediate, mid, and long-term development. So that is basically, you'll probably see that over the next 12 to 15 months, that process on there. Now, to be clear, we'll also be doing sidewalk repairs. That's not necessarily something that we need a master plan to do. On a broad scale, it is. But that's really where, and if some folks may remember, that is a plan somewhat unique to DOTI that will be required to go through a council process at the end. So there will be, absolutely will be that kind of planning and engagement process.
Thank you.
Great question.
Thanks, Joe. Anyone else have a question for Nick?
Sorry, Nick, just quick clarification. The council review is on the spot repair program or the overall sidewalk?
Master plan. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Clarification, master plan. Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
And for those of you watching online, Elena posted a very helpful link. The new tools and spot repair map are available at www.denvergov.org/sidewalks. So denvergov.org/sidewalks, just for anyone watching that can't see the chat. So thank you for that. Any other questions for Nick? No? Great. Thank you so much for the update, Nick. Appreciate it. We have one of our amazing area project managers here, Molly, who's going to be giving an update on Council District 5. So we are excited to hear all the great things going on in that corner of Denver.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Thanks for having me. And if you can't tell from my voice, I am recovering from a pretty bad cold. So I hope my voice stays with me through this presentation, and that I may put myself on and off mute if I'm coughing. So excuse me, you know, when the kids go back to school, it's like I am proof that they're back in school. All right, so District 5, this is Councilwoman Sawyer's district, and we have quite a few exciting things going on here. So some active construction projects that we have are the Tennessee and Oneida Stormwater Project. And so this is actually the photo I'm showing is like the first phase of that project. We did a new roadway on Kearney Street in Garland Park. It looks beautiful. I've been there. And so this is the third phase of that project. We finished up the second phase, and now we're starting the third. And so that is Mississippi east of Monaco Parkway and continuing east to Oneida Street. then north to the existing sump, just north of Tennessee Ave. And we are working to communicate all that to the public before we start construction. It has not happened yet. We expect that it will sometime towards the end of Q1, beginning of Q2. But again, we will communicate that out to the public as construction starts happening and we start mobilizing there. And then we have Quebec Street pedestrian and mobility improvements. Not sure if you guys have driven on Quebec, but you will see, I think if it's not complete, it's very near completion, that now we have sidewalks on Quebec in between 12th and Montview. And then there's some pedestrian improvements there as well that look very nice and new and shiny. And so that should be completed, as I said, if it's not already. And then things that are construction design. So actually right after this meeting, I'm hopping off to talk about Dayton. Councilwoman Sawyer commissioned her own traffic study, the Dayton traffic study, a number of years back. And we are just getting around to implementing some of the things to come out of that study. And so among some of the things that the study proposed is we're looking at parking along Dayton and just trying to slow traffic in that area. So we're after this, I'm hopping on a call to talk to the community about what that looks like and possibly just adding back some parking to slow traffic down in the area. But we're also looking at doing some other improvements there. So this is from Dayton to Alameda to Mississippi. We are going to install an RRFB at the Challenge School, which is actually in Aurora, but just borders is on our streets, Denver streets. So that RRFB is on our priority list, and we will, get to it when we get to it, but it's on the list. And then we're taking a closer look at that Alameda and Dayton lights and seeing how we can improve that specific intersection. So those are all things coming down the pike for Dayton. And then another storm water project we have in the area is the Jackson Street. And this again is a phase 3 of a project. It's the one that had shut down 14th for a long time. And now we're going into design for phase 3. And so we're seeing how we're going to finish that stormwater, the plausible routes along 12th, and construction for that is not slated to start until 2027. And then finally, some planning projects in the area. So Denver Moves Cherry Creek was a huge planning vision that finished up. As far as implementation goes, this year we are going to do some of the curbside area management plan, which is parking mostly. And I know that that plan, its details will be released to the public this year in Q1. It has not happened yet, but that is in the works to really look at parking in the area. And then the East Avenue Safety Study. So this you may have formerly heard of as the Parallel Street Study. It looks at 13th, 14th, 17th, 16th, 17th, 18th, lots of avenues there in relation to Colfax. And so the study was completed. We got it to the public late last year. We are going to host a webinar here very shortly in the next couple, by the end of January, February timeframe, to kind of explain what's come out of that study and see some of our more low-hanging fruit about some of the implementation that we can do. But most of the implementation of that study won't be until 2026 or 2027. And then again, another Sawyer commissioned traffic study was the exposition traffic study. So that completed last year. We currently don't have funding to do the things that she had proposed in that study, but just like Dayton, it kind of goes on our list and we'll look at it when funding allows. So that is basically the dry and dirty of District 5. Happy to answer any other questions you have or any projects I didn't mention. Just trying to give an overall bigger highlight here.
Molly, thank you so much for giving that playing hurt today. We really appreciate you rolling through that, especially with another community meeting tonight. Joe, you got dibs to go first since you are our representative from District 5. Take it
Well,
away.
thank you. Yeah. And Molly, I sent you an email and you've answered most of that. Did you get it? And I did ask Molly not to, I mean, I overstep my bounds sometimes, not to say so much about where she took her vacation last week and all that. And I hope we can encourage other people to see there's a lot going on. Now, most of it's related to stormwater and traffic. But as you can see, we're very concerned about the traffic areas. The neighbors are very vocal, so it's good. And Amanda has taken some steps, especially around exposition. That's a study, just so you all know, that is around where the high school is.
George Washington.
George Washington's there, and it's a real mess there and all that. And a lot of people go down. You may have something similar on Exposition Avenue. People avoid the lights along Alameda and Shortcut. So that's a very important study that we have that. Molly, there was another study done on Uinta a while ago, and that again similar. And our neighborhood's not asking for a lot, but just focus on this and see what little things can be done. Is anything going on with that, or?
Yeah, and again, that is just on like the exposition traffic study. It kind of goes into our queue. We try and pick out things that we can do without a lot of funding. And so I think from Uinta, we have some things on our queue that I refer to as low-hanging fruit in our funding era right now. Nothing is low-hanging fruit, but that we're going to try and implement. I don't know the list off the top of my head, but I think it's pushed out more because Dayton was done, I think, before Uinta, if I recall correctly. So we're just trying to, was said to be more of a priority. So we're focusing first on the Dayton and then, moving on down. She's done a number of traffic studies as well. So
I know. Yeah. And then there's just a basic bike lanes. And I think I said I finally rode down Kearney and Cremeria and see that is in construction, mostly done and all. Are there any other bike lanes that are under consideration in that area? Because again, it's sort of not a wasteland, but it's a large area without a lot of bike lanes. Although there isn't that much traffic on it either. It's more families riding around than it is people going to work. But there's still a pretty heavy bike traffic there.
Yeah, well, I can say this, that Kearney Cremeria is our longest stretch of north-south bike lane that we've implemented so far. So that is good news for, I think, East Denver. And that stretches through 3 different council districts. We're proud of that. But yes, we have Denver, we have the bike map on our website of what we're hoping to implement in the future as funding allows. So there's many more bike projects that we are hoping that to get funded. Nothing in the area in 2025, unfortunately.
I must have looked at the wrong bike map on the DenGov, so I have to look again.
I can drop it in the chat.
Okay, if you do that,
I can drop it in the chat.
I didn't see that. Just 2 more questions. One is Hale Parkway, and you mentioned that storm sewer project. And so I understand that Hale Parkway is part of that. And can you kind of inform us what's going on there or what the plans are at this point?
Well, I think that is all clumped in. It's all in design. So I don't know if we have a better sense of what that's going to look like or what closures are going to anything like that. So I think it's all being planned right now. Okay.
And then finally, and I'll let everybody else ask questions. The circulator buses, which are really popular, and we think, we have a pretty representative but older population too. There's some hospitals in the district and all that. I just want you to put a plug in that we want to be in line too to get some kind of circulation there. And there's, there's some shopping areas that maybe elderly can take, and there's the hospitals and things like that. Not doesn't have to go too far, but that would be a nice addition to our neighborhood too. And just put us on the list as high up as you can, not at the bottom of the pile. That's all I'm asking. And it's good to talk to you. We should
Thank
get
you,
together
Joe.
sometime. Yeah.
I would
Okay.
love that. Mhm.
Okay. Well, thank you all for
Thanks, Joe. Great questions. Other questions for Molly from the board? No, Molly, I think we'll let you save your voice a little bit more and rest up for your next community meeting. Thank you so much for
Thanks.
joining us and for all the great work you're doing in District 5.
Appreciate you all. Thank you.
Great. As I mentioned before, we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, which is unusual for us. So I'm going to relish this moment a little bit. We are going to move the elections a little bit forward because we have a few folks that did have to duck out a little bit early this evening. So tonight, as you all should have got my email, we have two folks that have been nominated and both accepted the roles. We have Aileen, who's been nominated for board co-chair, and Paul, who's been nominated for board secretary. But before we go too far down that path, I want to thank Jake Cohen and Gary Johnson for being great leaders for the last year. Jake has done an amazing job at co-chair. Gary's done a great job at secretary. So just want to thank them both for their service. Gary's been at it for the last year, been doing a great job. Thank you, Gary, not only for chairing the policy committee, but also working as board secretary. And Jake has been at this for the last 2 years. So Jake, thank you so much for your leadership, both here in the meetings and offline, so to speak. You've been a great partner here as well. So thanks for everything you've done.
Thanks, Alan. I will say real quick, Alan's incredible, guys. We're so lucky to have him continue to serve as co-chair. He just rocks it behind the scenes. I don't think you'll notice me being gone. You will appreciate Alan still being there.
Jake's been really humble. He's been a really great contributor, and unfortunately, you all are stuck with me for one more year as I 1 year into my 2-year term. Aileen, Paul, would you guys like to give a 20-second background intro on why you all might be interested in serving the role? It doesn't have to be anything formal, just maybe background on why you joined the board in the first place, so folks will know a little bit more about your leadership before we vote. Paul, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I noticed that in the language for the bill that we all passed as Denver citizens, the majority passed about 5-6 years ago, was buried a little line about also creating a committee of citizen advisors. And I had emailed my city councilman, longtime councilman Paul Cashman, so many times that when I emailed him to say, has anyone expressed interest in that? He replied back, I think you'd be a perfect fit for it, which I took to mean, and you can direct your attention and opinions to someplace productive. And so I ran for it. I don't think anyone else has ever wanted. I am certainly open to turning over the position to someone equal or more passionate about transportation infrastructure and smart design and sustainable investment in the city, but that's kind of how y'all got stuck with me. And so I found myself nominated for this position because I think I opened my mouth at the end of the last meeting and said, if no one else volunteers to do it, I would be happy to. I'm a hotel concierge during the daytime hours. I coach. That's sort of my passion and hobby. I coach lacrosse. I'm sort of a mercenary coach at the moment for about 7 weeks from the start of the season. And I graduated my 2 teams of Denver middle schoolers on out to various high schoolers. So I'm either going to have way too much time this spring, or I'm probably going to do something stupid and bite off another role or 2 teams and have not much, but I can certainly carve out an hour and a half or 2 hours a week to discuss policy. For me, what's super interesting about this is just the opportunity to learn. I think we all get very myopic. We see what we see on our commute, and we see what we see within a 2-mile radius of work and a 2-mile radius of home a lot of times. And then, you find yourself, I live down by DU, you find yourself up in Lohi or out of DIA or down, near Fort Logan, and you're like, oh, there's like bike lanes here. Oh, they put traffic islands in. So neat keeping abreast of what DOTI's up to. I've got a big green thumb. I'm excited to see the rollout of composting. And yeah, just love hearing the opinions and knowledge of everyone here. So I'll shut up and turn the board over.
Thank you so much, Paul. And we all know who we're going to be getting restaurant recommendations from going forward.
Happy to provide if you need them, guys.
Aileen, welcome. You have the floor for however long you'd like to introduce yourself to folks.
Well, I'll try to keep it really brief, but thank you so much for the nomination, and I'm excited to continue the conversations and lead these conversations with Alan. Alan does such a great job, so I'm actually probably only accepting this nomination. Alan is be the co-chair. He's such a good model for all this. Just a little bit of background on me. I live in Southeast Denver. I've lived here for 20 plus years. I've also been working in transportation for the 20 plus years that I've been here in Denver. I used to work at the Downtown Denver Partnership. Now I work for a global mobility nonprofit called the Open Mobility Foundation, which stewards data specifications that help mobility tech companies share information with cities and vice versa. So we've actually learned a little bit about these in some of our meetings along the way. But basically, the organization I work for helps to make sure that the city of Denver has the information that they need, particularly from like Bird eventually and Lyft, and all that information has been really helpful for the city team members to be able to advocate for more infrastructure, because they're able to see how many of these vehicles are using these corridors to get around. So that's my background. I love this transportation work because for basically my whole career, and it's getting less and less of a secret, but I have felt like it's been this secret magic power to improving our lives in cities and make our cities more livable, help us connect to all the fun things that we want to do and all the ways that we want to make money and to support our families and support our hobbies. And I just love being part of a group of citizens that are trying to make that infrastructure and that system work better. I also see transportation as a really great way for us to achieve a lot of different policy goals, the environment, economic mobility, safety, et cetera. And I love, just continue looking at ways to not just build a road for the sake of building a road, or even a bus stop for a bus stop, and insert whatever, but to help us become or have less of an impact on our climate, to help people find a way to sustain themselves and their families, and to keep people safer. With that, I also just do this for my kids, to help my kids get to school safely. So I talk a lot about them sometimes, so if that annoys you, just a heads up. Okay, that's it. Thank you, Alan, and thank you to everyone else for listening.
Great. Thank you both for both of our candidates. Do we have a motion on the floor and a second to move forward with board elections?
Motion.
Motion from
Second.
Jake, seconded from Joe. Thank you. All right, great. So we'll start with secretary first. All those in favor of having Paul as board secretary for the upcoming 2025 year, please raise your hands.
Hey, Alan, this is Danielle. My hand's raised. I just am having trouble finding it on my phone.
Great. Thanks for saying it verbally. Appreciate that, Danielle. Great. So 10 votes yes. And Paul, would you raise your hand for us? I think you're a great candidate, but no pressure if you want to vote for someone else.
All right.
There you go. There you go. You're signing yourself up. All right, great. If you could lower your hands, please. Any opposed? If you could raise your hand now. No, great. Congratulations, Paul. Get to be our board secretary for next year. No surprise.
Thank you for the honor.
All those in favor of having Aileen as the board co-chair for the term for the next 2 years, please raise your hand now. Great. 11 in favor. Danielle, did you want to cast a verbal vote on this one too?
Sure, happy to. Yep, approved. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Great. You lower your hands now. Any opposed? And I saw Gary, you had your, yep, there we go. Nothing opposed. Congratulations, Aileen. Be the board chair. We're really excited for your upcoming leadership. And while we're on the voting spree, let's vote. We forgot to grab our meeting minutes here from earlier. So all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes, if you could raise your hand, please.
Sorry, folks. Once again, verbal approval. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Danielle. Great. Looks like unanimous again. Any opposed or any objections to the meeting minutes from last month? Great. Well, thank you all. Congratulations to our new board leadership. Again, thank you so much to Jake and Gary for your great leadership this past year and the year before, Jake, as well. Thank you all for everything. It's great to have such dedicated citizens and residents here in Denver towards helping advise the department. Next on the list, I know we're running a little bit early on our schedule. I was wondering if the folks from Solid Waste are ready. We're about 15 minutes or so ahead of schedule. Get to go home a little bit earlier, so to speak. So Nina, would you like to
Sure.
kick things off? And thank you so much. A quick introduction. You all probably know there's been some big changes with the schedule with Solid Waste. I think a lot of times here we talk about transportation, but I would argue that the Solid Waste team is one of the most important parts of keeping Denver green and clean. So we're really excited to have them here tonight to share some of the details. So please take it away.
Thank you. All right, thank you for having me. And I'm stalling a little bit while I try, as always, to share my screen successfully. Okay, can you all see a PowerPoint? Nice and shiny?
Looks great.
Yes? Okay, first try. Okay, well, hi everyone. My name is Nina Waisdorf. I've presented to this group a couple of times now, I think, so I may be a familiar face for many of you. I mostly talk about compost, but I'm talking more generally about solid waste today. So, of course, as Ellen teed it up, thank you, we implemented some service changes and have updates on our compost rollout as a part of that. Those changes kicked in last week, starting January 6th. So I'm just here basically to provide an update on those changes, a little bit of the background, which you may have seen if you follow council and in the media, and yeah, just to kind of share how it's going so far and some next steps and how you can all prepare, so to speak. So, so just to dive right in. So what's changing? Or what changed, and apologies, I had all these shiny graphics that are now in the wrong tense because they've changed, but I wanted to use them anyway. So beginning in January 2025, we have shifted some of our services. So we do weekly trash pickup, bi-weekly recycling pickup, weekly compost pickup, and every 9-week large item pickup. So it's on a rotation. You may know we have 9 collection districts. We break the city up into try to call them areas for this because they, of course, do not align with council districts, so that can be confusing. But we have 9 collection areas, so we're essentially doing a rotation of those 9. With those service changes, we are also accelerating the rollout of the compost service. So you may remember me talking about how we were doing a phased rollout of the compost program. So one of those collection areas per quarter. Which would have taken us through the end of 2025 to complete all 9 areas. But now we are completing the rollout within this first quarter of 2025. So now everybody in Denver has access to our compost service, no more phasing, and I'll talk a little bit more about where we're at with that and what that's looking like. So of course, the big question is why did we make those service changes? So essentially, we looked at lessons learned and the data we collected from the first 1 to 2 years of our volume-based pricing program. our expanded waste services. So, and we found, in looking at that data, we found ways that we can improve the customer service. So essentially our route completion, as well as that compost rollout. We could improve our sustainability, both from a self-sustaining business, so to speak, which is the goal, and towards the city's sustainability goals. So kind of a two-parter for that one. So what we found is that recycling carts largely are less full with weekly pickup than they were on a biweekly cadence. So they're about half full, which means that people are, for the most part, recycling about the same amount between weekly and biweekly recycling. We really didn't see a huge uptick in the actual volume or tonnage of recycling that we collected. We're just driving around the city twice as often. And sorry, I'm at one of our facilities right when routes are coming in, so there's a little bit of background noise, but I'll try to talk over it. So noting, of course, that we have lots of super recyclers in our city, myself being one of them. So that is kind of the average that we're looking at. Some people, of course, are filling up their carts on a weekly basis. We know that. So we will provide second or larger recycling carts to residents by request. So a lot of residents have 65-gallon recycling carts. That was kind of the default size for a while. So residents can upsize that to a 95-gallon or get a second recycling cart. There's no additional cost for our recycling program. So it doesn't matter what size cart you have. You can have 2 recycling carts. That does not change your invoice at all. So if you are a super recycler, or if you have folks in your network who are super recyclers, they can go ahead and request that second cart or larger cart. Just to note that we are prioritizing those requests starting in April. So as our cart maintenance facility or cart maintenance team is very busy with the compost rollout, we're going to let them get through that, as well as ongoing cart maintenance work that impacts billing. And then we will swap over to those recycling cart requests. So just keep that in mind. And then, so kind of the next why in there is that, again, when we're looking at those sustainability goals and those service goals, expanding compost provides the most diversion potential. That's kind of the biggest gap that we believe we can fill. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide too. But adjusting those recycling and LIP schedules allow us to prioritize expanding that access to composting in terms of resources like staff and trucks, while maintaining high completion routes or high completion rates. That really is a priority of ours to make sure that we're collecting carts on your day of service. So the last point in there is kind of summing it all up. We looked at our tonnage, at our route completion rates, and we feel that we can better match service participation to our available resources, mostly trucks and staff. So we're basically right-sizing our services to collect what people are setting out for collection. And just to put that into perspective a little bit, weekly recycling requires about 17 extra daily routes over biweekly recycling, which is about 170,000 additional miles traveled per year, which generates about 1,200 tons of greenhouse gas emission of CO2e equivalent. In 2023, we only saw about an additional 5,000 tons from weekly recycling, and then it actually reduced slightly in 2024. So again, for circling the city twice as often, for putting those miles driven on the road and not particularly fuel efficient vehicles, we weren't seeing a huge return on investment, and we think we could just use those resources in a better and more efficient way. So again, just talking about those waste diversion goals, this is what I was mentioning about that diversion potential. And diversion really is just anything or diverting material that doesn't have to go to the landfill into another and better processing. So for us, typically we're talking about recycling and composting, but there are other methods for diversion. So the top numbers on this little graphic that is our estimated potential, essentially. So when we've done waste composition studies, so looking at the overall waste stream, we have found that about 25% could be recyclable, about 50% could be compostable. And for recycling, we're at about 19-20%. So we're actually seeing pretty close to what we could get total. But for composting, we're only at about 8%. So we have a really big gap that we can fill. So we think that's where our big potential is. Also putting in a side tip, because we've gotten this a lot. A lot of people say that their recycling carts are full. We have seen in the recycling industry what's called the Amazon effect, where we have so many cardboard boxes in the recycling stream. So we are just putting the tip out there. Please remember to break down your boxes, create more space in that recycling cart. Oftentimes, people don't break down their boxes, and that takes up a lot of extra space in the recycling cart. So please maximize your cart. Also, our recycling processor would like those to be broken down anyway, so double benefit. And then I'll kind of speed through this one because I think I've touched on it, but this is just kind of, again, aligning to the city's climate and sustainability goals, but also to priorities around vibrant Denver and great government. So again, reaching those high completion rates as well. So just to talk super quickly about the citywide compost rollout. So again, that is a really exciting part of these changes, is that now everybody has access to our compost service, regardless of which collection area you are in. So this graphic just tells you kind of where we're at. So areas 2, 3, 4, 5, and 8, we have previously rolled out to. 3 included, we did that at the very end of 2024. 1, 6, 7, and 9, so Northwest Denver, and then kind of our central and southeast parts of Denver. Those are the areas that were scheduled for 2025. Now, everybody in that area can request a cart. The deadline for the kind of accelerated rollout, we're doing like a big batch delivery in February through March 15th. The deadline for those requests was this past Friday. However, once we have expanded to an area, residents can opt in at any time. So if you have not requested a cart, or if you know somebody who has not requested a cart, you can still do so at any time now. We'll just do this first batch of requests that we received by this past Friday, and then we'll start a second batch, and then we'll just continue to deliver them on an ongoing basis. So you can, now the floodgates are open, everybody can request a compost cart. So just to talk again a little bit about 2025 so far. So it's only January 14th, so a little early to really have much data to show. But in the first week and a half or so, we have seen a significant improvement in route completion. So again, collecting carts on day of service and not spilling over into the next day, which was a challenge we've had for the past couple of years from a resource perspective. We've also seen a reduction in safety alerts, just anecdotally, just from chatting with our safety team today. It's been pretty quiet, much quieter for the past week and a half for them, which is great. And we've also, from that first batch, we've gotten about 17,000 compost requests. So those will be delivered in February and by March 15th. But then again, request one at any time. Also wanted to share quickly about our affordability programs. So we have had a rebate program for trash services since we started volume-based pricing. So it's an income-based rebate program based on area median income. And residents can get 50 to 100% of their bill at a bill taken off. But as Nick mentioned, the sidewalk program has begun. The trash rebate has now been bundled into an affordability program, or affordability rebate more generally. So now if you qualify for solid waste service rebate, you also qualify for sidewalk rebate and vice versa. So if a resident already has the trash rebate, that will automatically be applied to their stormwater bill to cover the sidewalk portion. And then there's some other information on there. Existing trash rebate recipients don't need to reapply until that rebate ends. So just a great dual program there. And then you can go to that website or scan that QR code. For the rebate, there is an online application, which is the easiest way to do it. But there's also information on there for how to request a paper application. There's an email address and a phone number. So super accessible. And then I think this is the last one. So just how to prepare again, sign up for compost. You can still continue to do so. Please download the Denver Trash and Recycling app, or we have a web platform that's a free app or like online widget that has collection reminders for the whole year. So you can see your recycling and your large item pickup schedule. You can also sign up for collection reminders so you don't forget which day you are. So we recommend that everyone does that. If you have the app, you can get push notifications, or you can sign up for a text, call, or email notifications. And then, of course, apply for the affordability rebate. And then last slide is just questions. And then I can't do any presentation without doing a reminder of what items go in the compost cart. So I'm always trying to get people to sign up. So that is it from me.
Nina, thank you so much for that. It looks like Andy, go ahead, and then Joe. I think you're on mute still, Andy.
Yep, there we go. Thanks. Thanks, Alan, and thanks, Nina. I appreciated the presentation on that. Couple of questions for you. You mentioned a reduction in safety alerts. What do you mean by safety alerts in this situation?
It can be a variety of things. We have some various ways of tracking safety measures from in cab and around the cab of the vehicles. So they don't always result in an actual incident. Sometimes it's like a telematics program, basically. So sometimes they're alerts, but it's just the more we're running around doing our thing, the more alerts are inevitably going to happen. But it has been quieter since we've leveled out our services a little bit.
And Nina, when you say telematics on that, that is basically our drivers are driving more safely, probably maybe because they're less rushed along there, which results in less accidents, which results in less, striking houses, with the arm. Don't want to be too dramatic, but stuff like that. So yeah, it's really the safety of our drivers, which is obviously super critical. But these guys are out on the public streets. These guys and gals are out on the public streets on there. Hence, that's why we're real excited to see that.
Yeah,
that makes perfect sense.
Better answer.
Thanks. You mentioned 17,000 compost requests coming in from this. What in a previous solid waste management presentation, that was also put into what percentage of residents? Do you know that number?
I can do the math really quickly. I think off the top of my head, so when you include, I think I did this earlier. So when you include the new requests with our current compost customers, so the folks we've already rolled out to and the previous subscribers, I think that brings us to about 40% of our customers.
Sorry, say again, what percent?
40%.
40.
Yeah.
And that's, okay, for 40% citywide.
Yes.
Okay. And then I guess my last question for you, I will say, talking to people about this, people are excited about compost, and then they find out that the recycling is being reduced. Everyone's disappointed about that. Is there thinking that this is a temporary measure, several years, something while compost is being built up and, the program's being set up better, or is this we're looking at there's no plans to return to weekly recycling for the foreseeable future?
I think it's too early to tell. It's one of those things where we have to just keep evaluating that participation in our services, and couple that with the resources that we have. So how many trucks and staff can we put on the road, and where do we see the most benefit? So I'm not sure that we can say a firm yes or no on that.
Okay.
It's just a constant evaluation and a constant look at our data and our participation. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Joe, take it away.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you. Nice recovery. For 2 years, I've been having to answer when am I going to get my compost bin. So I'm glad you guys changed directions a little and moving ahead. I think that's great. I did have one question. With the 50% on the composting, is there any, I hear from people that there isn't a lot they can compost. I mean, they can't do a pizza box and all that. And I don't know that you're going to get up to 50%. I mean, I just look at my food waste and stuff like that and yard waste. I understand what goes in, but 50% seems kind of high with the restrictions on what you can actually compost. Is that a consideration to increase that list of things?
Yeah, it's certainly something that we discuss with our processor. I will say on that, so a couple of things, and not to get too waste nerdy, but the majority of our organic stream is yard waste because we service all of Denver's single family homes. If you look at the commercial organics or the commercial compost stream, that breakdown is quite different, but ours is actually majority yard waste. That makes up a considerable amount of our stream, and especially when you consider some of the how many yards and trees we have in Denver, 50% is, you'd be surprised. And again, that's an average. It's not everybody's individual waste stream. That's when we look at the total. That's the estimate. And then as we get smart about really utilizing that utilizing the compost carts for food waste, and additional items, like really getting smart about how people use those compost carts. It is fairly reasonable. Not, I would say, for at least for my household, 50% is probably pretty accurate. And with the items that we used to be able to take, and now with our simplified guidelines, we can't take like those paper products that you mentioned. The changes didn't have a significant impact on our residential waste stream. Those paper products are fairly light. They don't really change the tonnage very much. We have not previously seen a lot of compostable products like cups and cutlery and stuff like that, because it's mostly people composting at their home. So we haven't seen a considerable change in how people use the compost carts.
Okay, well, I would think that yard waste and all that stuff is obviously very seasonal. Outside of the Christmas tree, I wouldn't imagine there's much yard stuff in the winter. Yeah. Or
yeah, our high peak yard waste season it depends on the weather too, but typically around April to November. So
Gotcha.
it's seasonal for most of the year. Especially this year, we had such a late fall, so we're still getting leaves in our compost carts. So it just depends. It is more seasonal, but the season is fairly broad here.
Thank you.
Yeah. I see Jake's hand up. I don't know if I can self-select.
Just I guess a nerdy question, Nina, but just curious. I assume that when we do our recycling, that's getting shipped off to some MRF. Are we doing a similar process with the composting, or is the city handling that in-house?
Yeah, great question. So all of our waste, we collect it from residents, and then all of our waste goes to different processors. So those are contracted vendors with the city. So our compost goes to WM. They're our compost processor, and they have a pretty standard windrow compost facility out at the DADS site, which is also the site of our landfill.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Jake. Andy, sorry, I was muted last time.
Yeah, one other question. So you mentioned people can opt in at any point. So say somebody moves into the city, whether they buy a house or they're renting, something like that. What's the process for them opting in, not around a big promotion of this? How do they find out about compost as an opportunity?
So I can drop a couple of links in once I stop chatting. So residents can go onto at any time now, residents can go onto their Denver Utilities online account, which is our customer portal. There's a drop-down function under Manage My Carts, and you can select a compost cart, And then those basically will get turned in, those will go to our cart maintenance team to deliver, just as if somebody had an upsize downsize request or any of our other cart maintenance work requests. So that's the easiest way to do it. Residents can call 311 and request a cart. 311 will walk them through signing up. Yeah, so at any point, there was also an option with this big blast to return a letter that we sent you. But now just as ongoing requests, 311 or through the customer portal.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, Andy. Nina, I had a couple questions for you. What are, correct me if I'm wrong, recycling is a default opt-in, right?
Yes. Well, a few years ago, before my time with the city, there was then everybody gets recycling drop off. So at this point, it is out there unless somebody opted out of it.
Got it. So what were the thoughts as to doing the optional opt-in for the compost as opposed to a default opt-in? Was it more operational constraints or just wanting to kind of see how it went initially?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for that. So because we were doing the opt-in by district or by area, getting a little better at it. We actually tested that first, like the opt-out process. So for our area 2, which is like downtown and to the north, between I-25 and Colorado, we did an opt-out program or an opt-out process. So we mailed a letter to everyone and said, if you do not want compost, let us know. Otherwise, you will get a compost card starting this month. What we saw there is we saw pretty high contamination in the compost carts for that area. So we saw quite a few carts being not used. So they just sat in the alley because people said, I don't want this, but they didn't bother to tell us. And then if you know that area, you know how much foot traffic there is. So those carts that were being not used quickly got contaminated just by people passing by. And then we just saw some general misuse of the carts. Some people were using them as second trash carts, which is certainly not what we want. Compost the compost stream is our most sensitive stream. The MRF that I think Jake mentioned earlier, the materials recovery facility that our recycling goes to, that facility sorts our recycling out by commodity types, and there are a lot of different checks in that process to sort out contamination. Contamination does need to be, or contamination is something we take seriously in the recycling stream, but it's a bit more automated. Our compost stream is very manual. Contamination that gets in there can end up in the final finished product of that compost soil amendment. So we really want to make sure that we're taking contamination seriously. So that was a very long answer, a long way to say that we found that when we switched to an opt-in program for the 4 remaining districts that we've rolled out to, we've seen very low contamination. So that tells us that the people who have requested a cart want to generally do it right. We don't have to hold people's hands quite as much. So as people get more familiar with compost, maybe we'll do a mass, everybody gets a compost cart now, but for now we're pretty comfortable with having folks opt in and let us know when they're ready to use it.
Awesome, thank you. You're probably going to cringe at my next suggestion, but when you all did the open house card exchange, I can't remember when it was a few years ago. That was so popular with folks. So if there's ever an opportunity to do that again, especially for folks that want to get that second recycling bin, to come to you guys as opposed to you have to drop them off. I know a lot of folks in our neighborhood are really excited to try to get another recycle bin in light of the change in services. So just want to throw that out there as well.
Yeah, I'll definitely share that with our cart maintenance team. That would be certainly alleviate some of our delivery needs. So.
And last thing, I just want to say kudos to you all for rolling out. I've seen some of the Vision Zero trash collection, solid waste collection vehicles around that have better visibility. So it's really exciting to see you all having vehicles that are safer so the drivers can see people around them. So thank you all for moving forward with that.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions for Nina? I like the confetti that Jake has on his screen. No, great. Well, thank you so much, Nina, and thank you all for the work that you all are doing to keep Denver clean and green.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Great. Our next agenda item is I'm going to put a little note here in chat. You all should have received an email here about a week ago, and then a follow-up email today with a link to a letter that we'll be chatting about here shortly. To give you, I'll pull up a PowerPoint. Nanita, if I could get presenting privileges if I don't have it already.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Thank you so much. So the impetus for this is kind of a continued conversation around making Denver more comfortable, streets more comfortable, some of our neighborhood streets a little bit more comfortable, especially for people that walk, bike, and roll. I'm going to try to share my screen here, and apologies. I'm not the best at doing PowerPoints on Zoom, so you might have to give me a minute here while I grab this. But the background on it is encouraging Denver to sign on to a letter that I think I think it's about 10 organizations have signed on to so far. And I'll share a presentation, and then we can share the letter, and I'll want to throw it out to the board to see if there's an appetite to also have the DOTI Advisory Board sign on to this. Can everyone see my screen here? Yep, great. I saw a nod there. So neighborhood greenways. So what are neighborhood greenways? Essentially, it's an evolution on the Denver's kind of neighborhood bikeway, kind of a step up from that, essentially. They're low stress, low volume, low speed streets that are very comfortable for people to bike, walk, and roll on in wheelchairs or use scooters on. They're very popular in cities like Vancouver, British Columbia, Portland, Oregon, San Luis Obispo, California. And they're great because residents can still park in front of their homes. People can still get deliveries. And I think they're lovely because you can see here's a picture of one. They have great placemaking elements and great greenery elements potentially with residents, and they're very popular where they've been rolled out. So what are we asking for Denver? So again, Denver's neighborhood bikeways are very much appreciated, but in a lot of feedback I've been hearing from some of the users is they don't quite go far enough in their design to kind of get more people on bikes or making them feel like welcome spaces for people to walk and roll on. You guys have heard from DOTI before, around 57% of Denverites would bike more often if there were more comfortable routes. And one of a CU Denver study commissioned with the Denver Streets Partnership in the last few years showed that only about 19% of people surveyed on these routes found them to be very comfortable on neighborhood bikeways. And so one of the key elements to these greenways is this concept of something called a diverter. So a diverter, and you can see there's different iterations of them. Some of them are very affordable and quick to install, like this version on the left, where essentially it blocks traffic from continuing to go down the street. So you get to the end of the block and you can make a right-hand turn. You can't continue forward. So if you live on that block, you can still drive on your block, you can park on your block, you can get deliveries on your block, but it's cutting down traffic. So it's going to make the street a lot less, have a much lower volume of vehicles on it. And you can see this other version over here, where it's a little bit more robust, where people are actually going to plant greenery in here, and they've got these large planters in there, and you can make a right-hand turn. You can't even kind of turn from one street to the other. So there's different variations of them. So to get the greenway, you got to have a diverter. In some recent surveys that have been done, about 80% of people prefer the diverters over traffic circles because it's limiting traffic on the street as opposed to just kind of slowing it down for that intersection. And you can't, there's essentially no traffic going through. So the speeds are a lot more manageable there. And as I mentioned before, they can also, very much be added for a sense of place and community. I was talking with a city planner in Vancouver a while back, and they were saying they've even had amenities like benches to some of the greenways to make them feel kind of almost like a little parklet within the neighborhood. And how are we communicating this wish to DOTI? So there's the letter I'll talk about in a moment, signed by a bunch of organizations. There's an opportunity for RNOs to sign it, and a few have. So I'll pull up the letter now. And then we can go through questions and see what thoughts folks might have on it. Can you all see the letter? Is this being shared okay?
Not yet.
Not yet? You don't see the letter, you said? All right, let me try sharing it.
The screen went dark. Yeah.
Okay, let me try sharing the screen as opposed to sharing the window. My apologies.
Yeah, Joe's not losing it. I couldn't see it either, just for what it's worth.
There we go. There's
all right, great. Great. So the goal of this, and hopefully you've all had a chance to read it over already, is to see if the board is interested in co-signing this letter with the other organizations in town. I think the Mayor's Bicycle Advisory Committee is also reviewing it as well right now. So the gist is saying, very much applauding Mayor Johnston and Director Ford for the goals of getting more sustainable transportation, writing to propose Denver's first neighborhood greenway, essentially an upgrade from the existing bikeways. I think, the bullet points you can see here, but I'll quickly go through them. These are great because they can be used to empower students to have safer routes to schools, either to bike or walk. Places like the 41st Avenue Bikeway next to Skinner Middle School and Trevista Elementary could be upgraded. It accomplishes the mayor's goal of having a more vibrant Denver. It's a pretty low cost intervention in the grand scheme of things. It's been implemented in places like San Luis Obispo, Vancouver, BC, and as mentioned before, you can add in amenities if we want. The mayor was endorsing the Vamos plan, which is calling for this sense of diverters on bikeways to make them more high comfort. And several council members you can see listed here also supported that plan as well. Vamos is also is part of the Bike Streaks organization. If you all have heard of Bike Streets and their low stress, high comfort bike map for getting around Denver. It's kind of a follow-up letter to a similar letter sent to Mayor Hancock and Executive Director Phipps in December of 2022. Denver's current execution, is essentially saying we could up our game here, and talking about some of the survey results that we chatted about, and saying that some of our current bikeways are having much higher traffic counts than what people are comfortable with. And then going through this paragraph outlines and saying that, this could be a great way to make these more high comfort. It references that study I mentioned before, talks about the number of cars per hour, kind of what's ideal there, and reducing that. And also where the ask is that the city consider running a temporary pilot program for our first neighborhood greenway in the summer of 2025, trying it on one street. And this is kind of a small iterative step, similar to kind of what the mayor said when he endorsed the Vamos plan. We don't have to go really big on this. If you all remembered kind of the Denver Shared Streets program on streets throughout the city, they're very, very popular in the early days of the pandemic, and lots of people were out there using the street. So I think there's definitely an appetite when people had the opportunity to have streets as more of a community space. Folks definitely use them very regularly, and I think having something like this could be a nice kind of a next step for both our bikeway and greenways. So I'll show you one quick example here of a bikeway. This is an example of one in San Luis Obispo. You can see here it has giant markings on it, and every 2 to 3 blocks it has the right turn only, and then you can see it, you go through pretty quickly if you're on a bike. There's the diverter, and you can see, there's a person biking by. You can see there's not a lot of traffic on this street. It's a pretty minimal impact that goes kind of a long way towards making that street a lot quieter, not only for residents, but anyone that's wanting to, walk, bike, and roll up and down it. So I'll stop that share now. I just want to see if anyone has questions, thoughts on the letter or the concept of the greenway so far. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, well, the one thing I didn't like about the letter, and I don't have an exact wordage, the previous administration and all that stuff, I wouldn't go there. Just kind of like we've been working on this thing for the past 3 years, and we hope that this administration could make it a high priority. I don't know, we have to mention Hancock and Phillips or Phipps, I mean, and things like that. So that was just one of my comments. We'd be a little nicer. Alan, I would think you would appreciate that, being the nicest guy I've ever heard. And then secondly, we did have a diverter, just so everybody knows. Our council district actually inherited it. It may have been Jake who caused the problem. It was already done. Remember at Williams and 7th, there is a diverter. And boy, the neighbors just came unglued and they didn't like it and all that. Now, I think they're living with it now and pretty well. But I would stress the fact that if we could make it a little bit greener, right, and do something, consider planters and things like that, that may be better accepted by the neighbors. Because at first it's pretty shocking. All of a sudden you see this and all these sticks sticking up and these lines on the road. So it drove every neighbor. I haven't seen anything like that before, that they're that upset. And now I think it's calmed them down. So it's the right thing to do. But again, can we enhance it aesthetically somehow, especially on our pilot program? Would be nice to do. I don't know if we put that in the letter, but just somehow suggest that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great feedback, Joe. I will, if no one has objection, I'll delete that sentence saying we hope the administration will take this ask from the community more seriously than the previous administration did. So we'll still reference maybe that previous letter, but we'll delete that sentence to be, as you said, a little kinder, gentler. So I think that's fair. Next in the queue, I have June.
Yeah, so I appreciate that suggestion from Joe. I think that makes the letter better. I will say I think I support this letter as I've read it. So having lived in District 6, in particular south by 25, for anyone in the know, right by DU, there are 3 diverters. There's one on Jewel between High Street and Williams. There's another a block south of it, and there's also a diverter at the intersection of High Street and Wesley. And those 3 diverters, I don't know when they were put in, right? But they, yeah, exactly. They have been there for as long as I've been in Denver, right? Everyone's used to them. They prevent cut-through traffic from the university from spilling out into the neighborhood. And I'm pretty sure that without the diverter at High Street and Wesley in particular, it would serve as sort of a bypass to University, and we'd see a lot more traffic on that street. So, you know, people I think are always hesitant to embrace change, especially if they weren't the ones asking for it. But at least my personal experience in the DU area has been very positive with those diverters. And these are now concrete bollards, the whole shebang, no posts, right? These are permanent fixtures. And at least for my time there, I've never heard any complaints, and I've seen them work, you know, and also as someone who bikes everywhere, they are permeable if you're on a bike or you're walking. And so it still feels like a well-connected neighborhood. It's just that sort of those key spots where there might otherwise be cut-through traffic, that's been completely eliminated. So I'm a really big fan of diverters. There's also some pocket parks farther north in Denver, which I haven't personally visited, but I've heard are pretty effective and nice. But definitely an idea I'm very much in favor of. I like the letter, but want to relate that personal perspective.
Awesome. Thanks so much, June. And Joe, to go back, I forgot to mention, I think the mayor and Dottie got the message loud and clear that the flex posts are not, the community is not a fan of those flex posts. So I think anything that they might do, I think they would probably keep that off the list if they could. Danielle, you're next in the queue.
Thanks. 2 quick things. Oh, and sorry, I'm talking on one device and video on the other. One question I had, being pretty new to a lot of these conversations was, is there a way for us to add verbiage, and it may not be, and that's okay, around the height of, if they do add actual greenery and plants, the height of it? Because I know in our area we have, in roundabouts, we have plants that are too high, and it's actually making the roundabout much more dangerous. And I could see the same thing happening with the plants that grow naturally in Denver. They tend to be very tall plants, tall grasses, and that can actually make a lot of this more challenging. big fan of greenways, but they don't really keep them trimmed. So I don't know if we can make any adjustment there, if it's worth doing, just throwing it out there. My other concern, and I'm more just opening this up for discussion and looking for feedback from all of you who have been much more involved in all these topics in the past, but representing a district that has very, very few bikeways. Although this sounds like a really great idea for the areas that do have bikeways, I'm also concerned about if this will pull away from even giving us any amount of bikeways in our area, if funds are being diverted to this type of project. So more just kind of looking for any feedback others might have in that, and not to detract from the value that I think this could add.
Yeah, I think those are both great points. Regarding the visibility, I think that's a really a smart line item. I think my initial thought is maybe that's kind of a conversation with DOTI if they open up and say, yeah, we'll try this. I think that's definitely something to be like, hey, great. Here are some thoughts we have now that you're open to committing it around accessibility and visibility. And I think that dovetails nicely. And your next point is like, hey, we should implement these in an equitable way. Right? Like if we should think about what neighborhoods have been neglected the most that would be interested in having this kind of infrastructure. And I think the department has been, at least in the recent years, has been pretty good about focusing on places that have historically been neglected. And I think that's another opportunity to kind of continue that conversation about where they would go. But I think it brings up a good point is, do we have more robust treatments that it's a conversation to go back historically. It's kind of an ongoing conversation. Do we have more robust infrastructure that costs more, that may get more people out on the road? Or do we start with something a little more low cost that won't have as much bang for the buck? So I definitely think it's something that you're not the first person that's thought of this for sure. And I think it's definitely something we need to kind of continue to have a conversation on.
If I can jump in very quickly on this, we are not in a year where we have pretty much any excess money. Like for improvements like diverters, we wrote letters and proposed amendments to city council about the budget, but none were adopted. And so we're stuck with truly like a minuscule amount of money for all bikeways, all neighborhood greenways, all everything. Literally $2.2 million is the dedicated budget for everything in that bucket, right? For every new project, if that makes sense. So, doing a concrete diverter, doing something more permanent and more beautiful with full landscaping, that starts biting into a significant amount of that budget in a way that I'd be less worried about in other years. But this year we've got so little money to go around that, I mean, this could be another conversation, is that like, hey, Mayor Johnston, DOTI, if we want to do this in a way that's beautiful, that the neighborhood can really accept earlier because it's more robust, because it's better landscaped, we need more money in the budget, guys. We just need more money in the budget. There's not enough money in the budget for this. And that's not the fault of, that's honestly, that's on council and that's on the mayor. And DOTI also needs to request it in their internal budget requests to council. So that's just something I'll highlight. I like permanent treatments. Our budget is worse this year than any other year I've seen it.
Yeah, thank you, Jim, for those thoughts. I appreciate those. Jake, you're next in the queue.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo a lot of what others had to say. I kind of am down to die on this hill. I think that some of my favorite streets in the city or places to walk have been the result of diverters. I have a nephew that lives on Bayard in West Wash Park, and I go visit him, and we walk down Bayard, and there's a diverter at Lincoln and Bayard, and it is just life-changing walking a 3-year-old down that street compared to 2-3 years ago. Just the joy and like being able to let him like actually go on a bike down the street is like crazy. And I love 7th between Williams and Logan. I know Joe brought it up, but since the diverter is actually paint and post, but the street is gorgeous, so it kind of does enough on its own. But I think that like if I could draw up an ideal scenario, I actually think Logan is the model between Bayard and 3rd Avenue. The median basically fills the function of diverters on Logan, with the exception of 1st Avenue. You actually can't cross Logan perpendicularly in nearly all of West Wash Park. And I think that goes to the equity conversation, is we have just beautiful diverter-like structures on, on Logan and Wash Park. And you could argue nearly every street in the Country Club neighborhood has some sort of diverter. And I think that says a lot. Like, I think that if where people are willing to spend the most money on houses is the neighborhoods with diverters, that kind of tells the entire story, right? And so I think that we should not subject, citizens of the city to a different quality of life because, these richer neighborhoods are just blessed to have diverters for 100 years, rather than these neighborhoods that have never gotten a treatment like that. And I think that anyone that is making these complaints, I'd like them to turn down a free house in Country Club, because I think that this is a wonderful addition to our city, and they make amazing streets. It just makes it all better. It really does. And nearly all of downtown's been operating just fine, with the 16th Street Mall serving as one giant diverter for 2 years. So it doesn't affect the city that much. So I'm just super pro this. That's the end of my monologue, but diverters make a beautiful city.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake. Andy.
Yeah, I think June said some of the stuff I was thinking about the budget for this year and just being worried about that. The idea of doing a temporary pilot program that also looks nice and gets community support. Sometimes just like, how do you do a temporary one that looks really nice, that can get people on board? Because we want to do it well. If we're doing this, which I think we all supported it in principle, we want to do it well, and we want to do something that is liked by the city and the neighborhood, so that we do more of these. And if we want it done this summer, is that rushing things? If we want it done quickly and fast and cheap, I think, what's the saying? You can only do 2 of those things. And I don't know which 2 we want to pick for that. So that's, I guess, just a concern I have. I do like it. I love the idea. And if we are sending the letter, couple suggestions of things to add in. It says in the letter it's affordable. If there was more specifics about, is it cheaper than doing X or Y sort of thing. So a little bit more on the price might help. And then also in a previous meeting, we heard about the city, or the mayor's administration, adding a priority on climate. So is there more we could say on the climate benefits of doing this? I know it's something we hear all the time, getting people out of cars, onto bikes, becoming pedestrians, etc. But maybe that's something that could be added to the letter to tie it to another goal of the mayor's.
Yeah, I love that. I think those are great thoughts, Andy. And I think you're right. Like, maybe the letter pushes the little pie on the sky of trying to hit those 3 goals at the same time. At the very least, I think there's opportunities for demonstration projects, right? Like, we've seen examples of this where they'll put up a temporary treatment for a weekend and encourage the neighborhood to come look at it. And you can at least, even though it might not be pretty, you might have cones out there, right? So it might not be the prettiest thing in the world, but it gives people an opportunity to look and see and feel how the street feels different, during an experience like that. An example of that was that DOTI followed through on, which I think is really interesting, is over here in the Jefferson Park neighborhood at Elliott and West 25th Avenue, between Elliott and Federal. I think it was 10 or 15 years ago, the Denver Streets Partnership, along with Better Block Jefferson Park, had a demonstration project of, it was just for like a day or for a weekend, and they changed the streetscape and they made it more people friendly. And they put up cones to show how you could make the street more narrow and have more public space. And just a few months ago, DOTI came up with a big unveiling of their Better Block Jefferson Park project, right? So I think you're right. It's definitely it's up to the department ultimately to implement, but I think there's an opportunity to look at a more permanent solution, and also more if we are, as you and June have so well put, in a budget crisis, there's opportunities to do demonstration projects for there as well. Regarding the sustainability component, I agree with you. It's certainly a climate goal. I think we touched on a little bit on the first sentence, but yeah, we can certainly call it out a little bit more around sustainable and climate friendly transportation. Danielle, I think you're next in the queue.
We'll get this all figured out at some point, guys. So I just wanted to add, I think the climate and environmental I really like, and I think that could also help because environmental justice specifically is such a goal with the mayor as well as with Kaiser right now. That may also help to kind of even out, you know, what I was speaking to before of making it a little more, I don't know, holistic for the city.
Great. I threw it into the first sentence there for anyone following along at home. Jake.
I think I'm in line with Danielle around aligning against other priorities. I think Andy and June for reminding us of budget constraints. But there was a study in the late 90s from Dayton, Ohio about like them reducing crime by about 50% in neighborhoods by putting in diverters. And actually, we have a public safety budget that we're not totally able to expend at this moment. And so potentially, if we make this less of a conversation around just bikeways and more of a conversation about another city priority and reduction of crime, there's not many things that result in 50% reductions in property crime that I'm familiar with as just one-off solutions. And so maybe that's a way that we could kind of, as one of my vegan friends says, feed two birds with one scone.
Thank you, Jake. We really appreciated that last part. June.
I'd be interested in reading that study. Dayton in the 90s and Denver in the 2020s aren't exactly the same city. But I mean, I don't doubt the possibility of crime reduction through environmental design, as Danielle put. But a 50% decrease, I'd be really curious why they saw that. You know, whether or not there's like a direct causation there and the factors causing that are similar between Denver and Dayton, or whether or not that's just correlation and the diverters happen to instigate something else that led to that reduction. Because there's a lot of devil in the details with that. That's a stat. I'm not sure how well that applies, if that makes sense, without reading it.
Great, thanks for those thoughts, June. Joe.
Well, Aurora actually did that on some of their streets. And I forget, does anybody remember where that was? They closed off a couple of streets that had some high crime areas. And again, it may not be what Denver did, but we might ask them kind of what happened there. And it was just outside of Colfax. So it might have been Colfax to 14th or Colfax to 16th. But they did close some areas off where there were some apartment buildings that had quite a high crime rate, and it really did lower the crime. So we can maybe use that.
Great, thanks for that thought, Joe. Andy, did you have your hand up a minute ago, or am I remembering that from before?
I may have. I guess just I don't know, what's the obviously we all want everything to be better now. What's the reasoning of asking for it this summer 2025 versus asking for it summer 2026? Gives people more time to plan, gives time to get it in the budget. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, well, number one is kind of, I think the fierce urgency of now. I think we're looking at our climate goals. I think the climate is, we're seeing the impacts of that for everything from hurricanes hitting the Florida coast to incredible fires hitting California as we speak right now, right? So I think one is trying to consider, you know, we came up with the Shared Streets program in a matter of months, and it was wildly popular. People loved it, and a lot of people participated in it. There's a great picture that I think Denverite did of just like hundreds of people walking down. I think it was it 11th or 12th Avenue, Jake?
11th.
Yeah, 11th Avenue. So I think that that's part of it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a recommendation, Andy. So if the department decides that, hey, we don't have the time frame or the budget to do this now, they can ultimately decide to, push it to 2026 or later on in 2025. And I hear your concern. We are in January and June is coming up very quickly, but I think it's a fair thing to, to bring up for sure.
And that makes sense. I think reminding me, I guess, pointing out that the shared streets thing came together pretty fast. My memory of those years were a little foggy, I think, like many of us. But yeah, pointing out that some of these things can happen really quickly is a really good point.
Any other thoughts or questions from Gary? Go ahead.
Yeah, I get a number of different periodicals that engineers get, and one struck me just this last week, and it's a bit germane to the conversation, particularly when it comes to using money that we don't have or proposing money we don't have, impacts to the climate and environment, and the like. The article that I'm going to cite is from a study by a company called INREX. They studied 1,000 cities across 37 different countries, and New York and Chicago were second and third behind Istanbul in congestion. But it goes on to say, which I found interesting, it says that the country's biggest increase in traffic congestion came from the 15th ranked, again, out of 1,000, the 15th ranked city of Denver, where residents saw a 19% increase in traffic delay compared to 2023. Now, diverters, redirection of traffic and that sort of thing, from a traffic engineering perspective, increases the miles traveled, unless you're extraordinarily efficient and well-planned travel patterns. The problem that I see is that we're talking about diverters, and we're talking about spending money on diverters, but nobody's, or I want to suggest that we start considering trying to solve our congestion problem, because talk about environmental impact, the amount of CO2 being generated by that much delay is astronomical compared to other cities where have maybe the same volume of traffic, but a lot less delay. So I would just say, in context, we should be focusing on safety first, which you'll hear more of that in the near future from our policy committee. But safety first, but then second of all, reducing the congestion that we have going on here and putting all the resources to those two topics. So I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
Yeah, Gary, thanks so much for those thoughts. Appreciate you calling out that INREX study. I saw that in Axios Denver too. Definitely something to kind of think about in terms of the traffic impact. And I think the nice thing about these particular treatments is they're going on streets that are low volume already, right? It's taking a low volume street and making it even more low volume. So it's not the collectors, it's not the arterial streets. So, but yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate your thoughts. Our resident traffic engineer on the board. I'll always love hearing from you. Jim.
Gary, did that study identify the reason for that congestion increase? Yeah.
No, June, it was a rather brief, I would guess an executive summary of some sort. You might be able to find a much more robust discussion on the issue. I mean, it talked about, New York and Chicago having 105 hours lost to construction or congestion, Chicago 102 hours lost, but I don't know how that compares. I don't know if that's hours per month, per year, per day, or what, or how it goes. So I think you're right. To dig into it a little bit deeper, you might want to Google INRIX. That's spelled INRIX, all capitals, Incorporated. INRIX Incorporated.
Yeah,
So
because I mean, because the thinking, you know, we can point to being like, oh, this was the largest increase of any city. But if post-pandemic Denver dipped 2 levels below other cities in terms of traffic, you know, then we should expect to see higher increases as there's a return to office. We had a lot of people move from during the pandemic and do remote work, and then might be called back into the office. Like I don't know. I'm always very wary about big boilerplate statistics because there's always that nuance hiding underneath the surface to really determine, you know, that statistic. We saw the largest increase in congestion should be our key to look deeper, you know. So I'm going to read this article and look at the study and see if there's any good insight.
Well, I completely agree that these broad-based comments and stuff in these little excerpts or executive summaries, you know, get to lead you in a certain way. But I would say that, you know, we're ranked 15th in the world for congestion, and that doesn't happen overnight. And it's also the statistic was since 2023. So I don't know when you can stop or when you need to stop or when we can, you know, stop talking about pandemic impacts, because that was in 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
So I don't, you're right. It needs a little bit more study, and I'd be more than happy to talk about that. Matter of fact, we'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow in our policy.
Yeah. And the article does list that Denver had the largest increase, but we're still less than half the average time to drive 6 miles than there is in like New York. We're way faster than San Francisco, than Chicago. Like we saw a higher increase, but the time to drive 6 miles is already way lower than those other cities. So comparatively, our congestion is still a lot better than those cities, even though we saw the largest increase.
Well, no, I agree that the comparisons, you know, may not be appropriate. The point is that congestion causes a much more significant impact to environmental air quality. And that's the bottom line, in my opinion.
One other thing to be considered in this is the number of residents as well. So when we're talking about Denver versus New York, I think that we're looking at pretty different populations.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Danielle, June, and Gary for those thoughts. Jake, and then Joe.
Yeah. I mean, first, I do just want to say I know some of the folks at INRIX. It's not a research organization. It's a software solution that is owned by automotive companies in a joint venture. So they're not exactly a neutral source. But I mean, I will say that if our goal is to solve congestion, unless we're going to build a wall around the city and never let anyone move in or not allow anyone to have children, like we're going to need solutions that work with the right of way we already have, right? And so one way that we can do that is to get people in alternative modes of transportation. We know that we have higher capacity and throughput. We can send 6,000 people down a bike lane an hour, but only 1,000 people down a car lane. And so when we talk about rolling out neighborhood bikeways and greenways, we're actually moving towards the solution towards congestion rather than introducing an impediment. And I think that that's something the city's actually been quite successful. If you look over the last 10 to 15 years in making mode shift, I think that we may very well have been first in congestion increase if we hadn't made the mode shift we had over the last 10 to 15 years. And so I'd love to continue to invest in that mode shift because we can't make any space between the buildings that isn't there already, right? So like I'd continue to advocate for that. Alternatively, if we want, there are other solutions to address congestion. The most successful in the world have consistently been congestion pricing, something that's now exists in North America. And so like we could explore something like that if that's what we're actually worried about. And then that could be a way to increase our budget.
Thanks, Jake, for those thoughts. Joe.
Yeah, I don't want to prolong this conversation, but June, as someone pointed out that we're a big space planning firm, and right after the pandemic, there were a lot of people working from home, and it wasn't until 2023, 2024 that then the companies were getting out of that. And so now mostly the companies we work for no longer say we want people working from home. So there is a little delayed reaction, and I can see that happening in the period they did. Now pretty much 90% of the firms don't like you working from home, whereas 2 years ago, you usually got 1 or 2 days off. So that obviously added to the congestion. And Joan, you're right. It's all in the little details that you have to look at to really figure out what's going on. But I also agree with Gary. We're too congested, right? We all know that. So try going to the airport at the wrong time. I know we don't want to build more roads there, but just trying to go to the airport at the wrong time, you'll find out what congestion is.
Awesome. Thanks for those thoughts. And in essence of time, since we are getting close to the end of our meeting here, is there anyone that hasn't spoken on this tonight that would like to provide input or thoughts before we kind of move on to the next step of talking about this letter? Nope. Do we have any motions for the board to sign the letter? Co-sign the letter, I should say.
Are we making any of the corrections or?
Yeah, I've been making them as
Oh, okay.
as you all have been talking about them. So that link that I provided earlier is a live document update on, and I'll share my screen real quick. Jake moved that the board signed the letter. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Brian. Thank you, Brian. I did update here this first sentence: sustainable and climate friendly transportation. And then down here, deleted the part about listening better than previous administrations, as Joe so eloquently mentioned before. So did make those changes. So there's a motion to vote on the letter. We'll go ahead now. All those voting to sign the letter, have DOTI Advisory Board sign this, co-sign this letter, please raise your hand. Danielle, you got your hand working. Love to see it. Love to see it. Well done. So we got 10 in favor. All those opposed, please go ahead and raise your hand. We'll give folks a second to lower their hand, myself included. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Nope. Okay, great. We'll have the DOTI Advisory Board co-sign this letter. The other thing that you all saw that I put in the chat there was the board survey for 2025. I'll be chatting about the results of this with Aileen. We'll have more to share with you all next month. But if you haven't taken it, just wanted to plug, we got a lot of great feedback around things that you want to learn more from DOTI on and things you want the board to advise DOTI on more next year, or just any general feedback. So just want to thank everyone that's already contributed to that. We'll be, again, sharing those results next month. But if you haven't taken it, please do so. We'd love to hear your input. And I'll also do another plug for recruiting. We do have a few mayoral spots open right now for mayoral appointees for the DOTI Advisory Board. Please encourage any of your friends to apply, or neighbors that might be interested in participating. Denver Boards and Commissions has a fairly straightforward application process on there where you can apply to be on the DOTI Advisory Board as well. Gary, do you have any updates from the policy committee or a sneak peek of tomorrow's agenda you'd like to share with everyone?
Well, no updates because we haven't finished our conversation. I will say that my invitation included a visit with Nick Williams, but unfortunately he's not able to attend. So we'll take up those other three or four items on the agenda tomorrow, as well as talking about and continuing to talk about safety. I've got some other data and stuff on safety issues. So that's it. There's nothing specific, but there will be something coming on safety for sure.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Gary. And as a reminder for those of you who are unaware, the meeting is tomorrow at 10 a.m. And if anyone needs a link to that, feel welcome to email me, alancogill@gmail.com. I'm happy to send that over to anyone, public or board member.
Thanks.
Any other odds and ends from the group? Andy, go ahead.
Two quick questions. The mayoral appointees, are there appointees for specific topics? I mean, is there any like theme to the appointees, or just the mayor appoints a bunch of appointees to this board? There's not like an appointee for specific neighborhoods, specific topics, etc. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll let Nick chime in here in a second if you want to say anything. But historically, we've had an appointee from the Mayor's Bicycle Advisory Council. That's Brian Carroll right now. We've had an appointee from the Mayor's Pedestrian Advisory Council. That was Jonathan Pira, but he resigned recently. So hopefully that could be a spot that could be filled. But besides that, it's been really the mayor's prerogative to appoint whoever he wants. Nick, would you add anything else to that?
Nailed it. Yep. Just diversity of perspectives is what he was, what the previous mayor was looking for. So I would expect the same from Mayor Johnston.
Awesome. And then my other quick question, the monthly updates we get from the different council districts, are those like scheduled out in advance, or when do we find those out? Do we just find them out when we get the agenda, or?
Yeah. So yes, they are scheduled out in advance, and I can email them all to you all so you can see when those are taking place.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Any other odds and ends for the group? Paul, I saw you on mute.
A question for you, but not the group.
Great. We can take that offline if you want to give you a call afterwards. Great. Well, I just want to again thank Gary for his last note taking of the season and for being a great secretary for the last year, and thank Jake for his service as well, and congratulate Paul and Aileen. And I think 2025 will be an exciting year for the board. So thank you, everybody, and we'll give you 6 minutes of your evening back. Thanks again.
Have a good one, guys. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
All right, take care.